Well, I've left my battery charger over at my parents' from having Christmas din-dins. I'm trying to use an old one, and it's sort of one of those ones that charges batteries over a long period of time. It doesn't do like a 15-minute charge up, so you know it doesn't sort of get the high voltage state you need for modern digital cameras. It's okay, good. It's okay for the current, but not for the voltage sort of thing. Anyway, as you can see, this only seems to get the light in the afternoon, so I may actually have to move the box over somewhere over there to see if we can get full, you know, 6 hours or more sunlight sort of thing. But I don't know, as it was knocked around by some bird or possum or something, so I thought I'd use it. But it seems to be taking on a different sort of, you know, a different sort of green and sort of, I don't know. But so what we're looking out for is whether the stipples. Yeah, by the way, I've already made this speech before, so you know, bear with me. It's one of these lost clip things that was quite a long one. Probably about 8 minutes, and I've lost it. I'll have to talk it all again, sort of thing. But anyway, what we're looking for is one, red stipples, double figure eight, sort of fiddleback sort of thing with the leaves. Whether we get any red roots with red root hairs on them, sort of thing. So this spacer disc is just so that we don't scour out any of the peat while we're watering or adding water, trying to keep the peat nice and mushy and moist, which is something I would have avoided in the past, because I went down, after reading a lot of books, went down the, you know, the roots require oxygen, sort of aerating the soil medium idea and concept sort of thing, which I think is actually the wrong path to be on. I think we need to be on the reductive flammable gas pathway, sort of highlighted from my experience I did with the sand, where you could actually see sulfides being produced, you know, just barely centimeters under the surface of the damp wet sand sort of thing, which implying that it was already, if not micro aerophilic to almost anaerobic, just centimeters below the surface of the soil sort of thing. So when you compare that with the concept of reductive flammable gas, you know, you're trying to make a reductive zone straight away, and you're trying to have the gas, you know, coming up. The other thing is, as I said, most people, I don't know, they seem to have got onto this peat and pearl idea. There seems to be no, doesn't seem to be attributed, or there's no accreditation to anybody or any society, any one company or business. It just seems to have sprung out of nowhere, and I don't know, it seems to have sort of just popped out between probably 2008 onwards or something like that. It definitely wasn't really much about when I was first on the internet. Yeah, from 2008 to 2000 from 98 to 2003, and then I was off the internet for about 5 years. When I got back on, but you know, if it was attributed or accredited to anyone, you think someone would mention somebody's name, but everyone just seems to be following on from this idea of peat and perlite, with no mention of why they're doing it, no attribution or accreditation to any one person, any article in a bulletin, any society, CP Society, or any other wetland plant society or anything like that. No one seems to be mentioning a word, but they always seem to be following like sheep sort of thing. And I think it can actually, I think you're right, fellas. I think, yeah, perlite does generate reductive flammable gas, but only when you wet it with, you know, water up to about 60 degrees. If you wet it with boiling water, it seems to curtail the reaction. It doesn't, as far as I can see at the moment, it doesn't seem to be coming back like charcoal. Now if you wet charcoal at 100 degrees of boiling water, you'll curtail the reaction, but it does come back. So there's a difference straight away. So that's why I suggested maybe you should be using charcoal, not perlite. 2, you could actually make charcoal yourself from a whole range of carbon sources. All you have to do is put it in a container with a whole load of nailed holes, like a coffee tin or something like that, with no holes on both the bottom and the top. Get it red hot inside with whatever you put in there, and then you just put it on the ground so that the ground covers the holes on the bottom, and you put some sort of covering on the top, you know, a big thick heavy piece of board or something that's not going to catch fire or something, or a slate or something like that, and then you just let it cool down, and basically anything that's got red hot in there will turn into lovely charcoal. You can have an experiment between softwoods and hardwoods if you want, but my suggestion is you use softwoods. Though that concept from years ago may change over time with more research, but my initial suggestion would be to use softwood as opposed to hardwoods, because hardwoods have a lot of heavy metals and stuff, because they also have the bark and things like that, which accumulate all these sort of things. The trees basically try to dump the things into the bark, and if you're then turning the bark into charcoal, you'll also be carrying on all these heavy metals and things like that they try to dump. Okay, over to your charcoal sort of thing. But the other thing is, so you can see that people seem to try and get as much perlite as possible into their peat and perlite mix, to such an extent that the roots going down can't basically avoid going through a particle piece or nugget of perlite, and so you've got these roots going through, trying to go through this nice soft peat, being seeing the perlite as probably a bit of coral or scoria or something, and anything that's got a root that sort of wants to be mycorrhizal, which some CPs seem to be, if not all of them, they're going to scour their roots going through the there's no way they're going to be able to avoid if you pack the perlite as densely as you could. So my suggestion is, instead of actually mixing all your perlite through your peat, thinking that's easy to do sort of thing, as I said with these things, stick it in this sort of bilayer sort of situation, so you actually force the reductive flammable gas that's generated by the perlite in these saturated conditions to come up through the peat, so it keeps the peat nice and healthy and in a nice reductive way sort of thing. So and therefore the roots are then growing down through this soft peat that's got dissolved reductive flammable gas in it sort of thing, and then they're also heading towards, if you're going to do the further experiments, you're going to put some sort of iron in there, so you get reductive iron, because I reckon that most of the major growth and coloration, in the rapid growth that we've all been dying to find, is going to come from the iron being in this reduced form, which only occurs when you have this in the presence of reductive flammable gas over a certain period of time. And I've got experiments I'll show you later that seems to be showing this to be so, that iron reacts differently when it's in a reductive flammable gas environment. So that could explain all the all these wet walls and the appearance of iron you get on wet walls and things like that, where you got like red Drosophila capensis and things like that growing in South Africa on these wet walls that seem to have this sort of iron, so-called tannin stains on them sort of thing. Because I think that's what the so-called tannins is all about, is really just a reductive form of iron. It's a safe form of iron sort of thing that we've been trying to get to for years, but hadn't made the connection with the reductive flammable gas. So, as I said, the tip of the iceberg, the point of the triangle, all seems to be the production of reductive flammable gas. Why it wasn't in any of the books growing up in Western Australia, I don't know. Probably because we hadn't made the connection, whether anyone knew of it, it just didn't want to tell anybody, I don't know. But I think a lot of nurseries and commercial places have got onto this sort of thing, and whether they're actually getting reductive flammable gas and sort of like pumping into the water through like a soda stream type of arrangement, I don't know. And they're just not telling you. Whether they're getting it to be generated in the soil by other means, I don't know. So if you've got any sort of iron in a reductive form and you transfer them out of the pots or anything like that, or the reductive flammable gas is not actually being generated in soil, it's just in the soil because they pumped it in and it's not being actually generated, over time it dissipates and your iron can't be held in a reduced form, it oxidizes, and that would explain why you get plants dying in pots if you don't transfer them over. Also, it could explain a whole load of other problems we have. So So by trying to do a good thing, they're actually making something completely bad sort of thing. So yeah, you have these absolutely gorgeous, drop dead, gorgeous looking plants, and no one can actually, you know, they almost have to die before you can save them sort of thing. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to get onto was this thing, which I talked about earlier, but all I did is I took this sort of 1.5 litre thing, and I cut it higher than that. That's a 1.5 litre line, by the way, and I cut it higher than that, and I filled about half of it with chunky charcoal, and I put it in there and kept it, sorted it in like a jigsaw puzzle sort of type of arrangement, but it still has some voids in there where water is pulling. Now I would have been absolutely scared to do something like this even months ago sort of thing, but with the reductive flammable gas being generated by the charcoal, that'll keep that water quite healthy, I believe. And this is high density polyethylene, or HDPE, so it hopefully will keep the gas in there and forcing it to go upwards, which is why I chose these Pyrex bowls here. One, because it can handle the hot water when you want to wet down your charcoal or your perlite, but two, also most glass vessels will keep gases like that inside them sort of thing, so you know, it forces the gas can't dissipate out into the water, it has to go up through the peat sort of thing. Same with this, the gas, this is an assumption of course that it can't get out through the high density polyethylene plastic, so you're forcing it to go up through the peat, keeping a nice healthy peat environment and a soft peat environment, so you're keeping it really quite wet, wetter than I would. So I'm not going down the roots that require oxygen aerated soil. I'm going down, these roots require a reductive flammable gas environment, and in order to generate the reductive flammable, you've got to keep it wet, and you've got to keep it in a bottomlands situation. Do you understand the word bottomlands? It's in all the old books and papers. They talk about this term called bottomland. Of course, bottomlands is an area where the water will pool, and therefore if it's pooling, you're going to get a saturated environment which has the potential to, you know, generate reductive flammable gas, which then can be held in the water for a certain amount of time. I don't know how long it's held in the water. Experience with, you know, just breathing CO2, forming carbonic acid in water by putting it through a straw. It can be held in the water for, it can keep the pH down low for 3 or 4 days before it's dissipated out of the water, even when the water's in sunlight, you know, getting fairly warmish. So whether this is a similar situation with the reductive flammable gas, it can stay in the water for 3 or 4 days after generation, but this is a somewhat continual generation situation. It is temperature dependent as well. You do get more coming off when it's warm, but whether that's because it speeds up the reaction or whether you're just actually forcing it out of the water as well, I don't know as yet. More experimentation needs to be done, but this is another reason why I'm keeping it in the water, is to keep a nice cool root zone. So you actually got a wet situation, a reductive flammable gas bottomland situation being generated, keeping the peat in quotes healthy or healthier than it would have been in the past, but also at the same time keeping the root zone nice and cool, so you might be able to adapt this to Darling Tony or something like that. So